And my name is Michael Heitzler, and I feel so honored that y'all would even come and listen to this. Most guys, like me, they play golf, or they go hunting and they watch sports games on TV, or they go fishing and boating. I'm a history nerd, and I couldn't help it. It just kind of got into me after I got here. I was 21 years old when I moved here to Goose Creek. I went to Kailua High School in Hawaii. I went to the University of Hawaii, and then I came to Goose Creek, South Carolina. Go figure. But my dad was here. He was the Marine commander of the Marines in Charleston at the time. Right after I got here, he retired and went back to St. Louis, and my family, my mom and my brothers and sisters left, and I stayed here in Goose Creek, teaching at Goose Creek High School. 8th grade, South Carolina history. Did you teach that too?
No, I was there when you were.
Were you one of my babies? You know, well, no, I don't know you, so that's good. Unless you go stand in the corner, I might recognize you from the back. I don't know. I don't know. But I ended up wondering about this weird place named Goose Creek, South Carolina. I started asking people if they knew anything about it, and nobody could tell me anything. I even went to the old black guys and women, because they had farms through their families here for generation after generation. The old ones, they were like 50 years old, you know. But when you're 21, that's old. And they started giving me bits and pieces of information, and I was so excited because I started kind of cobbling those pieces together, and a story began to emerge. And over the years, I was able to write, I think there's 5 books there. It's kind of hard to see them there, but they're good here and here. Can we turn these off, Carrie? We used to run the place. Okay, now is my microphone working okay too? Okay. All right, that's a little better. I published this one in 1983. That was my first effort, the South Carolina History Press. And then this one here came out about 10 years later. The History Press, Goose Creek, a definitive history. Planters, Politicians, and Patriots. And then a year later, Goose Creek, a definitive history. Rebellion, Reconstruction, and Beyond. And then I wrote my favorite one. This was about 10 years ago, the Goose Creek Bridge. You're going to be fascinated with some of the things that are in that book. I love it. That's my favorite. And then this one here, the Chicken Trilogy, there at the bottom. I'm going to tell you a short story there. I went home for that first year I was teaching at Goose Creek High School. At Christmas, you get vacation. So I went home to my parents in St. Louis because my dad had retired and gone there. And my mom brought this little book out. They were doing antiquing or something going around. And she brought this book out and she said, Mike, I think this has something to do with where you live. And it was entitled Little Mistress Chicken, a Veritable Happening. So when your mother gives you a book and you're 21 years old, what do? I just threw it in a box somewhere and I didn't look at it for about 35 years. Literally. And I got it out and looked at it. I thought, my gosh, she said this is veritable, which means it's true. So I went back and tracked it, and it is true. The people in it were true. They actually lived there. The school, the schoolmaster, all that was true. Then I thought, who is the father and who is the grandfather? And I found out that they're incredibly important people. And we'll touch on that as we go through our lectures tonight. This is the first of 7, along with those 5. And if you need any of these 5 books, I'll be bringing some of them doing these lectures, and I'd love to give them away, because what am I going to do with all of them? I buy them by the case, and I give them away to people that I think will actually read them. And I think you'll actually read them. But however, I've had people say they wanted to buy them and use them for gifts and things. I do not touch money, so don't say, here, I want to buy. I do not touch money, never have, never will. But you can order them. You just type in Heitzler History Books or Heitzler Goose Creek, Google it, and they have the books come up and you can order them, or you can go to City Hall. I give books to the city. I just hear some books, and they sell them at City Hall or at the community center. So they're there available for you if you want them. Otherwise, if you hang around with me and you pretend like you're my friend, I'll end up giving them to you anyway. And I just think I just turned it off. Okay. And these are some of the booklets along the way. I was very proud of this one here. This was actually published by the South Carolina Historical Society. They liked it so much, and they're real fussy people down there. You got to have everything perfect for them. No misspellings. Oops. And there's some more. The Wassamasaw and beyond, the Goose Creek Men, Button Hall, Woodstock, and Windsor Hill. And here's some more that are still available. You can get these at City Hall. City Hall produces them. Frank, where are you, Frank? Frank lays them out. Where is the Frank that lays out the books? Okay, tell him to hurry up. But he lays them out for me, and then we produce them, and I give them to City Hall, and then they'll sell it, and the city keeps the money. They sell them for half price. If it costs $10 to make a book, I'm sorry, I can't figure this thing out. $10 to make a book, City Hall sells them for $5. That's your government for you. They figure they'll make up in volume. Okay, but that's government for you. Okay, and we put up 25 historic markers over the years. I know that book that I gave you tonight, the Goose Creek Bridge, and if you read a chapter, go to the front and it'll have a section on the chapter 1 or chapter 6 or chapter 12, whichever one you're on, and it'll give you the addresses of each one of the historic markers that relate to that chapter that you just read. And I've had a good many people tell me they read the book and they like to go drive around and go find these are guys like me that don't have enough to do. They go around and they find the old historical marker and they read the markers. So that's kind of fun. And then hidden history coming to life. You know, when I first got here, we didn't have any St. James Avenue or Goose Creek Boulevard. We just had Highway 176 and Highway 52, U.S. Highway. But
you were going to tell us about Chicken Trilogy?
Maybe.
You said you were.
Oh, I know. I'll get to it. I'll get to it. Just, Mike, just stay out of it. Okay. Actually, Mike and I are pretty good buddies. We have breakfast together at Valex's, and the food's no good. We just like the company. But anyway, so we named one St. James Avenue, the other one Goose Creek Boulevard. How come? Because back in the day, there was no towns, there was no cities, there was no districts, there was no regions, there were nothing except parishes. And they adopted the 10 parishes from Barbados down in the Caribbean, and one of the parishes they divided in South Carolina into 10 parishes, and one of them was the St. James Goose Creek Parish. So by having one highway called Goose Creek and the other one St. James, the St. James Goose Creek, it's the community. And it's a sneaky way to kind of get you to subliminally start learning some history. You know, starts creeping into your minds, along with Button Hall Avenue. Where'd that come from? That was the avenue to this building here. And those are the trees you see on Button Hall, and it goes from here over to the 18 Mile House Tavern. So this right here where we're standing is an incredibly important place. Not Goose Creek, not South Carolina, but the dirt under your feet is where the Southern culture emerged to spread throughout the colonies. The dirt right under where you're standing and sitting right now. And we'll learn that tonight. We're going to tell you about that tonight. And then there's other places around town, lots of names we don't have time to go through, like Athyn Place. Anybody live in Athyn Place? It's a residential community. That was the first name of Goose Creek. The Indians called the place Enfant. Maurice Matthews was a surveyor, and his first plats that he would draw out, he wrote along Goose, he would write Enfant, A-D-T-H-A-N, A-D-T-H-A-U, E-D. And later on in one of his day books, about a year later, he said, Athon is what the Indians are saying, onk, onk, because of the abundance of geese and other waterfowl. And that was the origin of the word Goose Creek, from the Indians. And then we have ballards and capstones. You might see them around town. Those are what the rich people use to designate their properties. I just thought that West Vaco Development did a great job when they laid out Crowfield and developed Crowfield. I thought it was a great job, and I was hoping that Goose Creek would stretch that type of architecture and amenity, stretch that out throughout the entire city. And so that's why the city put down these interesting bollards with capstones. Really, really, really rich people. use these to designate their entranceways or designate their properties. And they're very expensive. Not so much the bricks. You could make the bricks here, but there was no stone, no granite stones available. You had to import that from England. So these are very important. And then what do you think of our architecture that City Council selected to represent the municipal buildings? What do you think of that architecture? Did that look like an old, broken down, old plantation house? With the windows are missing and the doors are missing, and that's what it's all about. Goose Creek is an old, broken down, old place. And welcome to City Hall. And then historic Goose Creek. We spent $27,000 to put these two big signs out on I-26 and one on University Boulevard. It says, historic Goose Creek, next whatever. Then I have people say, well, where do I come to Goose Creek and I look all over the place. I can't find anything historic there. And that's something that I hope that our city leaders will wrap their brain around. We need to have a destination for people to come to Goose Creek and seek the historic ambiance of the place. There needs to be a place for them to go. And we have a brand new commission with a brand new commission leader, and I think for art, and I think that might be a good place for that objective to be. These are the lecture series that we're going to be going through. Tonight, Founding Fathers of the Deep South. Next week, 18 Mile House Tavern. Then the next one would be Blackbeard, Watery Jack, Ghosts and Ghouls. That's going to be my favorite. I think you're going to really like that. Bring friends with you. October 28th, Revolution in the Creek. November 4th, Civil War in an Uncivil Land. November 11th, Reconstruction and Beyond. November 18th, Bar Fights and the Rise of the Modern Goose Creek. And I'm not stretching it. That's where Goose Creek was developed, down at the bars. And I'm not being critical. And how do I know about it? Well, I was down at the bar. Yeah, and I remember boy, I'm really digressing, I'm sorry, but the guy from the district that would arrest people, he called me one time, I was a school principal, he called me at school and says, Mike, don't go to those bars for a while. But I'd go down and have a beer, find out what's going on. There's a lot of illegal stuff going on. And he said, don't go down there. And so he said, trust me, don't go to those bars. And so I didn't. And in the newspaper, about a month later, they had arrested the sheriff and the owner of the bars for racketeering, and he wanted me not to get drug into that mess. I was just having a beer. Hi. And being that I'm Catholic, that's okay, okay? To have a beer, okay. Hi.
Excuse me?
This is our guest speaker for this evening. And I do have a book for you, ma'am. I only have 2 books left. I'm going to give one to our guest speaker.
I need to know what to say, right?
No, no, no. You can just hang out with me and nobody will know the difference. I'll bring some more of these next week to see. I got another case at home, I think.
Thank you.
And who else needs a book? Yes, sir. I think you'll like it. It's got a lot of pictures in it.
Oh, good.
Good. I'm glad you guys got a good sense of humor, you know? Because I'm just a wise guy because I worked with kids all my life, you know? They're always cutting you down. Okay. Now, if y'all have to leave, if you have to get up and leave now, all you got to do is know this word to understand tonight's entire lecture. This word is primogeniture. Raise your hand if you know what it means. Oh, smarty pants. Smarty. Is that Barbara? No, I'm sorry. How do you know what primogeniture means? Nobody's supposed to know that except Judy, because I told her.
I don't allow Judy to say what it is.
I think it's really cool. And then who else? Was that Joya?
You used it in one of your other lectures.
Did I? What is it? What does it mean? What does it mean? It means the firstborn, primogenitor, the firstborn. And the next one is entail. So when land passes, when the guy that owns the land dies, the entire piece of property has to go to the oldest son. You can't just and it has to be all of it. You can't just say, I'm going to give all my property to the oldest son, except the house is going to go to my wife. You can't, it's not legal. You have to give everything to your oldest son. Primogenitor. And that made all the difference here in Goose Creek and all the difference in Carolina. You'll see how that plays out. The Goose Creek Men, that's the lecture for tonight, the founding fathers of the Deep South. Tell me what you see up there. Tell me where James Moore is.
Looks like Florida.
Who's raise your hand? There, yeah, yes, sir. This is the great-great-great-grandson of James Moore, and he's coming back from the where?
I think that's Florida somewhere, but that thing was doing, he's rounding up some slaves.
Thank you. So you see, James Moore's right here. I've had this image for years, but I had no narrative on it, and I ended up talking to the superintendent of the Okomoki National Park near Macon, Georgia, and she said she'd never heard of it either, and she doesn't know what it is, and she called me back the next day and said, Mr. Heisler, I found this in the foyer to our library. It's a, what do you call it, a diaphragm, or whatever, Diorama. It's a painting with miniature models in the front. And so we have James Moore, who was the leader of the Goose Creek Men and eventually the governor of South Carolina, and we're sitting in his plantation right now. And across from him is Watery Jack, and we'll spend about 20 minutes talking about him, maybe next week or the week after. He was his liberated slave, Watery Jack. But tell me, what else do you see here? You said they're coming back from Florida? I can't remember stuff. There's a name of a place in Florida. Is it Appalachia? What? Apalachicola. That's where he's coming back from. In Florida. It's on the panhandle of Florida, right? Yeah. That's where these guys, these are Goose Creek men from this area. All these guys along here are Goose Creek men. And they're leading 100 or so slaves. I'm sure they're bound together somehow. They're leading them back to Charleston to put them on ships and send them down to the Caribbean islands to work on the sugar plantations. And what else do you see? Look at this trail here. It's a foot trail that is really deep. There's been a whole lot more than just a few hundred people walking down that trail. I would say there's thousands of people walking down that trail. Questions?
Date. What date?
Date? Okay, no. I would say 1708 or 9 or 10, something like that. Okay, because he was the governor by 17. I can't remember stuff. We had the Yamasee War in 1715. He was the governor by this time almost. So that would be the early 1700s or the late 1600s. I think it's the early 1700s. And his son grew up with him on the front lines of the war party. His son grew up and ended up taking over his dad's job as being the leader of the Goose Creek Men. And his father was the governor, and then when his father died at the age of 51, then his son became the governor after that. I sent a book. This is not the book, but I sent a book down to get published a couple months ago, and their review board down there, their chairman called me and said, how come you call it the Goose Creek Men? Why can't you say something about the women? No, I mean, I'm not being critical. They're just trying to sell a book. I'm just trying to get the information out. I said, because the political party was called the Goose Creek Men. And women were not even recognized as much of anything back then. They were second-class citizens. The most interesting personality I've come across in studying Goose Creek across the last 350 years is that man right there. He enters as a young boy, about 14 years old, into the story in Goose Creek. And I hope maybe, if not next week, the week after, I'll give you the full background on him. I had to pull information in from the University of Virginia and University of North Carolina, as well as the University of South Carolina, to get the true story and the full story on that man. Remarkable, interesting character. And then we have the historic marker right in front of City Hall, Founding Fathers of the Deep South. How do you feel about the thing, Founding Fathers of the Deep South? Does the Deep South make you feel warm and cuddly and cozy and all that? Does it? Yes. Okay, say, who raised your hand that said yes?
I agree.
You think it's warm, cuddly, I love it. I ain't from here, but I love Goose Creek, I love South Carolina. But the Deep South, how about Deep South culture? Does that make you feel really lovable and really proud and comfortable, and you want to go get some cocoa and sit outside? Or does it bring up some pretty obscene ideas about slavery and Civil War and Confederate flag and KKK? A lot of that has spoiled our emotions towards the place that we call home. But the founding fathers of the Deep South, yeah.
What does the 857 designate?
Eight means the county number is 8. The 8th county, the counties have a number. Every county up to 42. There's 42 counties. We're number 8. And it's the 57th historic marker in Berkeley County. The Goose Creek men, founding fathers of the Deep South, landed in Carolina in 1670. The seafarers pushed inland from Charleston to claim the arable soil spanning both sides of Goose Creek. Those first families formed a political party called the Goose Creek Men. Many of these Goose Creek immigrants sailed from Barbados, the richest and most horrifying society in the English-speaking world, and a place notorious for its inhumanity. So you would expect maybe things would get pretty nasty right here in Carolina if the guys that are controlling the place, that are coming in here, are coming from the richest but the most horrifying society in the English-speaking world. They came from Barbados. You see the little arrow over there? Barbados looks like a lima bean in the Caribbean. And most of these are also English sugar islands. They started off trying to grow tobacco, and they found out that sugar grew very well and very quick. They just needed a supply of labor to make it happen. So they came from Barbados, and the Goose Creek men brought the brutal Barbadian slave-based culture with them and implemented a strict caste system, land-based aristocracy, and a myriad of ostentatious behaviors that soon characterized coastal Carolina. The most obvious ostentatious behavior that I can think of is one of the Middleton boys had a carriage that was worth the entire, that would cost the same amount as an entire household would cost back in the days. And all he would do was drive around, would never even stop at a tavern because that would be below his dignity. But he would send his aides in to get the mail and things. But his carriage was outrageously expensive. The Goose Creek men politically and militarily overwhelmed the entire colony, and near the end of their 50-year reign, the imported Barbadian culture diffused into North Carolina and Georgia to eventually taint all of the southern colonies. So southern culture started right here where you're sitting. And then it spread throughout all of the Goose Creek area, the Cooper River and the Ashley River, all of Carolina, and then into North Carolina, and then into Georgia. And by then, the Goose Creek men were no longer in power, but by extension, the others carried it to the other colonies. And this is what it looked like on the maps back at that day. I would say this is a 1710 map. I don't know if I can see a date on there. But you can see South Carolina and Florida touched each other back in the day. And then north of us, starting at the Santee River, was North Carolina. So a little different situation. But the fundamentals of Deep South culture, whether you love it and you feel warm and cuddly when you think of the Deep South, or whether you hate it and you think of all the terrible things that came out of the Deep South culture, it was conceived in England, it was born in the Caribbean, and then planted in Goose Creek to expand throughout the southern United States. So what do you mean conceived in England? What are we talking about? William the Conqueror defeated England in 1066 and established societal racism, caste stigmas, ostentatious lifestyles, oligarchical rule, primogeniture land rights, and expansive militarism, all of which infused a culture that eventually exported to the New World. William the Conqueror conquered England and declared the entire England was his property. He owned it. Nobody else had any right to it. He was the king of England, Scotland, and Ireland, and Normandy, which is a big fat hunk of Europe. But then he said, I will give some of my land to my relatives, to my brothers and sisters and cousins and aunts and uncles and things like that. Started giving them away. And then after he did that, he said, I will also give more of my land to my friends, those that are close to me. That's how he divided the land up. And if you didn't get any of the royal land, then you were a nobody. You were a peasant. No, they didn't call them, yeah, they called them peasants. Serfs also, serfs. And the southern part, they were peons and peasants and serfs. And in Eastern Europe, they were called Slavs. That's where the word slave came from. But he conquered everything, and That's where the royal system came from. If you were a non-Norman, then you were a nobody. You had no rights, no right in courts, no right to own property, no right to have anything except to work for the man. That's what it was like. And that was such an important event, the Battle of Hastings, when England fell to William of Normandy, that they created a bateau tapestry 230 feet long, that's almost as long as a football field, to depict the Battle of Hastings. And why do I have it in there? Because back in the day, nobody could read, even the king couldn't read. They had some guys in the monastery, some of those monks, and all they did was study the Bible and learn how to read. Nobody else could read, so if you wanted to really project the importance of this event, then they did it by creating this tapestry. That's something, isn't it? It was almost from about this high, this long, this wide, and almost as long as a football field. And look at all the fine sewing that went into it. The Norman yoke. William's reign imposed a caste system dominated by the invaders from the European mainland. All the white people in England were nobodies, and they had no rights. Only the king, his relatives, and his friends. The Normans subjugated the tribes into distinct caste systems. Primogeniture, the first son, could inherit the land and nobody else. A landed gentry caste resulted when England adhered to absolute primogeniture and entail. And as a younger son of the king, Richard the Lionheart was not expected to ascend to the throne. He had 6 brothers and sisters, and he was not the firstborn. So what did Richard the Lionheart do? Did he decide he was going to work on his big brother's property? At 16, he was in charge of the military, the local military that was protected his kingdom. At the age of 16, he was such a robust young man. But he couldn't stand working for his older brother. So what did he do? What? Created a crusade. That's great. He did that. He led a crusade to the Holy Land. And the crescent moon, he brought back the crescent moon as a symbol of the Near East. He brought back the crescent moon and wore it on his heraldry. Heraldry would be like a jersey, or what do you call it? Something you would wear over your armor. Not a jersey, but a what?
Jumper.
A jumper. That's a good one. A jumper. And he would put that crescent moon with a star in the middle to let people know that he led a crusade to the Holy Land, to the land of the Near East. Richard the Lionheart charted a crusade and returned with the heraldic crescent moon as his cadence mark for the second son of a prevailing family. And there it is. And it's the crescent moon right down here. You can see it right here. And above it is a star. And later on there's some debate that that's not really the moon. And maybe it's not. They say that is a crescent, but it's not the crescent moon. But if you go back to its origin, why would it have a star right behind it? It kind of makes you think. That's not a piece of watermelon that's been eaten. It's not a crescent, piece of pastry. What else can be a crescent besides a moon? That's all I can think of, and especially if it has a star above it. So this is all relevant later on. Crescent in a starry sky. And look at the ancient archaeological work that was dug up over the years in the Middle East. You can see how often the crescent moon is used. Here, look at that. Later on, that looks like a piece of armor. They called it the gorget later on. And I'm not going to argue about it, but later on they said, well, that was the armor that hung underneath the chin. But this is long before there was gunpowder and armor. And that looks like a crescent moon here, here, here. You can see it. And there's a moon god. You can see the moon, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stars around it. Now, the Islamic people will tell you that is not a symbol of Islam. No, it's not. It's only the symbol of the ancient moon god, and Islam has nothing to do with the ancient moon god, okay? So I've had that discussion, and I believe them. It has nothing to do with Islam. Oops. But those are the flags over there in the Middle East today. You see some images that look sort of familiar. Not all of them, but most of them have the crescent moon on them. And it has a star. I think it means it's the crescent moon. I think it's the moon up in the sky. That's what I think. In English heraldry, the crescent is the symbol of the second sun. The first son on his heraldry would have that first item. I don't know what it is. The second one would have that crescent. And then you can see what the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and ninth on down would wear. And why would you wear that? You'd wear it on your heraldry. This was the bottom, middle, upper. The dexter to the left, dexter to the right, they call it. And when William Moultrie created the flag of South Carolina, they put the crescent moon on the dexter, upper right dexter. That's kind of creepy. We got like a Middle East symbol on our state flag. And I love our state flag, but just think about it. Don't tell anybody outside this room. Okay? Okay? That's the promise. And other families then in England began to adopt, the second sons began to adopt the crescent moon as a symbol of their pride for being a second son. I'm a second son just like Richard the Lionheart. And look, I'm going to wear that crescent moon in a very proud and dignified way. And you can see these are just 5 that I pulled out that had the crescent. The Southern culture was conceived in England. So do you see what I mean? But it started in England with the second son, the royalty, all the property, all the land was in the hands of the king, period. You had no rights, you had no due process in law, you were nothing. If you were just a guy, you're nothing. If you're royalty, you're something. Otherwise, you're nothing. And you have no rights. But it was born in the Caribbean. Why do I say born in the Caribbean? Remember, we pointed out where Barbados is, and all those little islands down there were English sugar islands. And the proprietor that the king gave those properties to, and he wanted him to go down there and make as much money, he encouraged the second sons to go to the Caribbean, and he would give you land in the Caribbean if you were a second, third, or fourth son. If you want land, we'll give you land in the Caribbean where you can grow sugar cane. So it was born in the Caribbean. Sugar plantations, the Scots, the Irish, the Native Americans, African slaves were brought to the Caribbean to work on those plantations. And they enforced primogeniture and entail. The land passed from one generation to the next, but only the oldest son could get it. And I'll just give you one example that popped into my mind. Benjamin Middleton. You ever heard of him? Nah. I didn't either until I researched. Benjamin Middleton was the second son of England, so he got land for himself in Barbados. And as he got older, his oldest son was named Benjamin. So when he died, Benjamin, his oldest son, got the big plantation down in the Caribbean on the island of Barbados. And his second sons and third son, Henry and Edward, they came to Carolina. And then they settled at Otranto, and they settled at the Oaks. That's all part of entail and primogeniture. The second sons of England settled the rich islands of the Caribbean. King of England, King I, purged Ireland by ordering his forces to, this is what the king did. Now, this is a great king. I'm kind of free on what I talk about. King James I, he had 50 guys come together to rewrite the Bible. King James Version of the Bible. Very important work. He also ordered his men to root out the Papists, those are the Catholics, plant Ireland with Puritans, and then secure it. We got any Catholics in here? Aha! So we know why. I'm Catholic too. We're really kind of a pain in the neck, But he wanted to get rid of the Papists. What are you going to do with these Papists? Papist means a follower of the Pope. Get rid of them. Get them out of Ireland. And then plant with Puritans, and then plant Ireland with Puritans, those are the Protestants, and then secure it. What is it going to do with all those Irish Catholics?
Send them to Barbados.
Send them to Barbados. Yes, ma'am. They were sent to Barbados. Slaves from Africa cost 10 times more than an Irish slave. Now, I've had some debate on this. Some people say, well, they were not slaves. They were indentured servants. Well, if you're captured against your will, and you're put on a ship against your will, and you're sent out to an island against your will, and you're not allowed to leave, ever, you're a slave. And they cost only 10% of what an African costs. Why would an African be so much more expensive than an Irishman? I never thought of that. Were they bigger? Maybe they were bigger. Okay. Why else?
Spoke the same language. Pretty much the same language.
Okay. Well, the Irish spoke the same language too.
They had knowledge of.
Oh, the Irish spoke the same language than the Africans. Therefore, they could organize and be a threat. Gotcha. Good point. I didn't get that. Ed, what'd you say, Ron?
They had knowledge of planning.
They knew how to plant. They were good at it. And many of those slaves, many of those African slaves were multi-generational slaves. So they didn't expect to ever be anything but a slave, where that Irishman was always a little bit of a troublemaker. Plus, they could not take the heat and the sun, and they didn't live very long. Between 1652 and 1659, over 50,000 Irish were transported from Ireland to the West Indies. Some were Barbadosed. Barbados is an expression, a word that was invented back then, which meant you're kidnapped against your will and tied up and put on a ship and sent to Barbados. You were Barbados. You've all heard the word Shanghaied, right? That's where the same thing, Shanghaied, in the late 19th and early 20th century, they Shanghaied people and send them off. And in the, if you Google, which you can't believe everything on Google, you know that. If you Google, they said these are slaves, Irish redneck slaves. But there weren't. I don't think they had any cameras down there taking pictures of slaves. I think these were Irish fishermen in the Caribbean. Okay? And they were called Red Shanks, Poor Whites, Poor Bakra, Bakra Johnny, Beckaneck, Baked Neck. Today they're called Red Legs. And here, these little girls are the same ones. I think these are photographs of little girls whose ancestors were slaves in Barbados. And I think they were taking their picture there. They were called Poor Bakra, Bakra Johnny, Poor Whites, Icky Bicky, Poor Backward Johnny, Poor Whites from below the hill, Edie White Mice, or Beckaneck. That's baked neck. Do you know where the redneck thing came from? I think that's it. And I think they were called rednecks because they're Irish, they have red hair, they got freckles. I got a bunch of people. My mother's Irish and all her people. And they're all the same. They're all like that. Oh, wow. Those cute little girls. And I had the pleasure of meeting the prime minister of Barbados. He would come up, he was working on tourism and things, and we met and talked many times, and I took him on a tour a couple times. And he always referred to them as red legs. That was their name. It wasn't like a slang. In our country, you don't use slangs for race. But he called them red legs, and I said, I think his name was Edward. This was probably 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I said, if I go to Barbados, would you introduce me to some red legs? He said, oh yeah, no problem, Mike. He said, they come in on the weekends to town to sell their stuff. Now what does that tell you? That they're segregated. Huh? Well, he was a white guy. Okay. But they were segregated, and they expected them to stay segregated, and here's some of them right here. And you know, what kind of a life do they have there today? I bet you it's pretty doggone nice, you know, in the Caribbean, and living a good life. Looks like the black kids and black folks and the white folks are getting together really well. I don't hear didn't pick up any idea that they were mistreated in any way during the modern time. Today's red legs, and they're called red legs, and it doesn't bother them. That's just what they're called. That's not a derogatory comment that I've just made. But look at this map I love this map. I just found this thing maybe a year ago. Map of Barbados, and look at that image on the top of there. The guy's on a horse shooting a couple African slaves in the back as they run off. The whole idea was they had the most cruel slave laws in the world, and the idea was to enforce the law on your slaves because those blacks would get organized and they'll kill you because they had so many of them. So you better keep control of them. There he is right there. And that is the system that was brought to South Carolina. That kind of thinking was brought from Barbados to South Carolina. The renowned philosopher John Locke, the Barbadians endeavor to rule all. And this is a sea captain wrote this poem. I just had to share it with you. Barbados Isle inhabited by slaves, and for one honest man, 10,000 knaves. Religion to these a romantic story. Barbarity and ill-got wealth, thy glory. He didn't have a very good opinion of the people in Barbados. Within that horrid context, the cultivated acreage expanded in Barbados until few unfilled fields remained, pressuring younger sons to seek land elsewhere. And they came up here to South Carolina. The fundamentals of Deep South culture were conceived in England with primogeniture and entail, and the king owning all the land, royalty. It was born in the Caribbean. That system was put to work in the Caribbean, and they made gazillions of dollars out of that sugar. And the sugar turned into rum, and they were selling the stuff all over the world. And then it was implanted in Goose Creek to spread throughout the South. The Barbadian lifestyle drove the second sons to Carolina, where they acquired large estates in Goose Creek near town. They didn't stay in Charleston. As soon as they got off the ship, did they stay in Charleston for some reason? Why didn't they stay in Charleston?
Water.
We've already talked about this thing. You're pretending like you know everything. We had breakfast together this morning. They didn't have any water. There's no water in Charleston. It's all salty. You can't drink it or do anything with it. You know, if a human being going to live there, they're going to have some wells. But you don't have enough water. Well, hey, Sarah.
Hello.
I wish we had some chairs for you. I'm sorry, we just... Okay. So they went inland just a little bit. Here's the road they followed. And you go inland, you come to Goose Creek. And one of the earliest plantations was Jamin's Hall.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
How did the road get there if it was populated from Barbados to here? Where'd the road come from?
Oh, that road that I just showed you? That's a later map. That's much later.
But if they came from Charleston,
They came from Barbados. They came to Charleston. They got off the ships.
came up here,
And some ships went up to Cooper
okay?
or up to Goose Creek. And the road was put in later. I just showed you how that you could go inland that way by land.
Okay,
But,
understand.
and there's the early, let me go back. You can see the plantation house there. And this is Jamin's Hall, one of the earliest plantations built on Goose Creek. This is the Goose Creek Neck. And then this is another plat that shows the Goose Creek Bridge coming across Goose Creek, the bridge, going past the church to the parsonage house. I'm sorry, the parsonage house is right here. This is the Oaks Plantation Home. And then this is the road to Boochaw. The road to Boochaw is the road coming here. So this was called Boochaw. But when James Moore died, he divided it up. He didn't obey any rules. He divided his up among his kids. His daughter got this place called Button Hall. And the rest of it was divided up. Okay, and then that's just another close-up of their plantation house. And there's James Moore, your great-great-great-great-great-grandpa right there. He was on the map. There's I'm just going to run these really quick. I think we might be... What time is it? Am I running out of time? 7:17. Oh, I got 45 minutes, and I could tell jokes and stuff. There's the Oaks. Have you seen the Oaks lately? I just took a picture of the... Yeah.
Why did they do that?
Okay, yeah, I just took a picture of the Oaks without the gate the other day. Why did they do that? Well, the man that owned the Oaks and the 32 acres behind it where the golf course was, he died, Harold Mims, and his heirs was an older son and a couple other siblings. I'm not discrediting them at all. The older son actually called me at my house. They would not annex it to the city of Goose Creek. I'm not going to get political on any of these things, but the Goose Creek city government at the time worked really hard to try to get them to annex it to the city of Goose Creek so we could protect the property. They wanted nothing to do with that, no. Now the son, and this is a very sad story, the son called me maybe a year and a half ago at my house and was very, very angry. because he said people were stealing things out of the old house. The copper wire, the tubing, the copper tubing, the wire, everything was being stolen, and we weren't doing anything. And I said, well, you're not in the city. We can't enforce laws that are not in the city. And then it was a very difficult conversation after that. The house was destroyed about 2 weeks later, and he committed suicide about a month or two later. And isn't that sad? And I'm not being derogatory at all.
It was we lived in that
Uh-huh.
neighborhood for many years.
Oh yeah, the Oaks, and it was a magnificent property, but it was just sad. What happened is very
The
sad.
reason they wouldn't allow it to be annexed?
Well, if
There had to be a
you,
reason behind.
yeah, why they wouldn't allow it to be annexed, I feel pretty bad about talking without that family with me.
I understand.
And I don't want, why did they not want it annexed? Because if you annex land, you got to pay taxes.
I understand.
I think that's the simplest way, yeah.
Well,
I'm sorry, what?
it sat idle after the fire, the kitchen fire, okay? And it had to be brought up to code. And because it was on the historic registry, couldn't something been done to have brought it up to code where it wasn't cost prohibitive?
First of all, I don't know if it was on any type of historical registry. I could never find anything.
I thought there was a plaque.
I know, I put the plaque there. It was just a, plaque was from the South Carolina Department of Archives and History. That doesn't mean that it's registered and you have any extra rights. We got the Rotary Club to pay the $1,800, and I did the plaque and we inserted it right there. I was in the Rotary at the time.
And that's not the original house.
No, it's not. Boy, you all know so much. That was built by the Parsons. I have a book that I wrote called The Oaks Plantations, Mansions, and Moonshine. Get it down at City Hall for half price. I think it's $5. Not only does it tell you everything about the Oaks and answers lots of those questions, it tells you about all the moonshine stills and where they were located and who was in charge and where they sold them and which sheriff's deputies were in charge of it. This was before that sheriff. And interviewed a lot of people on that. Boy, this is just fun. But let me just run through these houses. There's the gate. I took that just about a week ago. That's sad. There's Otranto, the Elms. This next picture shows you the Elms ruins. You see the magnificent brickwork done. I just wanted to show that. And Crowfield Plantation. Crowfield Plantation that we know today actually there used to be 3 plantations there. There was Crowfield, Fredericks, and Bloomfield. There was 3 in 1. That we all call it all Crowfield today. But there was 3 dynamic plantations.
Cherry Hill, a part of that also?
No, ma'am. Oh, yes, but Cherry Hill was not a plantation. Cherry Hill was named after, boy, this is such great stuff. Thanks for these questions. Cherry Hill was named after a plantation owned by Lamb Stevens, who was a black man and was the most wealthy person in the St. James Parish in 1860 when the Civil War began. And I have, did I ever write a book on? No, he's in that book I just gave you. Okay. Yeah, I think I got his last days in there. Oh, it's called The Land of Abraham. It's the book I wrote, and it's at City Hall, and it explains how the people didn't know, how in the world is this black guy who was born into slavery, I'm digressing, but what the heck, I'm having fun. Born into slavery in North Carolina, he comes down the door, he gets free somehow, and there's some rumors about him and the wife of the owner. There's just rumors. Then he came down to Dorchester, and then he acquired this land, and he would bond out his children and later his grandchildren to get money to make investments, and then he'd buy them back out of slavery. And his neighbors were so in awe at this man's success, and his plantation was called Cherry Hill. That's what you put me on this run. And his neighbors were so in awe at this man's talent that one historian went by to interview, and he wrote in his notes, he said that his neighbors said that he was exceedingly black. I mean, how can this man, he don't have any white blood in him, and look what he's doing. His neighbors said he was exceedingly black, so how can he do it without white blood? That was the way people thought back in the day, you know? I kind of get chills. Some of these stories are really cool. Anyway, in that book I gave you here, there's a section on him because he donated part of Cherry Hill Plantation. He donated it for an orphanage over in Ladson. And I wrote about his orphanage and everything. Oh boy, This really, and never mind, there's another little guy, Cuffy Campbell, who, never mind, I'm digressing terribly. He was a little skinny black guy he walked away from the plantation when the Yankees came in, and he ended up with Lamb Stevens over at the orphanage. Anyway, Crowfield, well, how come I won't change? The Hayes Plantation, we were talking about that earlier. Raise your hand, who were we talking? Yeah, the Hayes and Woodstock, it's next to that. Sir, the Hayes is written up, I have that written up, I just don't have anybody that will publish it yet. But you can keep your fingers crossed. Everything is ready. The last dot has been put in it. I just can't find anybody to publish it yet.
Where was that plantation?
That was, oh, you know where Palmetto Parkway is? That's right in there. Middleton Place? They never made any money there. That was just a beautiful, magnificent destination for tourism. Mulberry Castle. The Cooper River planters joined the Goose Creek men. This is Dean Hall Plantation. Have you all ever been to Cypress Gardens?
Yeah.
Go to Cypress Gardens. That's the old rice hydro ponds for Dean Hall Plantation. That's where they would keep their water and then release it across their rice fields. Medway Plantation, that's my favorite. And these are the names of the people that came from Barbados to Goose Creek. You can see so many of their names here. And right here, see where it says Moore? That's where your grandpa plantation house was. Tonight, we're right here in Button Hall, where his daughter acquired this land. But have you ever seen that map?
I haven't seen that one. You guys can't show it, so we probably spread it around.
Yes, sir. And they came from all the different islands in the Caribbean. I won't go into all of that because we're kind of running out of time. And Commissary Gideon Johnson wrote, "The Goose Creek men, generally speaking, are the vilest race of men upon the earth. Transporting themselves hither from Bermuda, Jamaica, Barbados, Montserrat, Antigua, Nevis, they are the most factious and seditious people in the whole world." Now, we thought that our politicians were arguing and calling names today, didn't we? You know, why can't they be gentlemen, you know, all that. The Goose Creek men were, I'm sorry about your grandpa, but he was one son of a gun. They were almost all English descent, but they were English West Indian bearing a harsh caste culture of the West Indies. Many names of the Goose Creek men are shown on this map. We already talked about that a little bit. You see any names up there you're interested in? Shinkin, yes. That was right on Goose Creek, right next to the St. James Goose Creek Church. Have you all been, raise your hand if you've been to the St. James Goose Creek Church. Yeah, everybody goes there, and maybe we can organize a tour. The last time I did that several years ago, how many went to that tour maybe? Wow, it was disaster. It was hundreds of people there. And oh, okay. And the police had to come because the road was blocked, and then it was, were you there, Ron?
Yeah.
Way to go, man. I got into a lot of trouble doing that. I did, a lot of trouble. The vestry had a long talk with me. But maybe if we organize it with no more than 25 at a time can go, we can go. That's it.
What do you know about Calabla?
Who?
Calabla.
I don't know anything.
Is there anything else about Shanking that you know?
Shinkin, yes.
I live off of Forster Creek Road, so I'm...
Yes, ma'am. Did you get my book?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to give you another book next week. Remind me. And the code word is, give me my book. Okay? I'll remember it's you. But I'll give you the book about Shinkin. It's a big fat green book. It has all that in there, okay?
Oh, the History of Goose Creek, volumes 1 and 2?
It's volume 2, yes, ma'am.
I have both.
You got, okay, well, look, go index, look, Shinkin. It's right there.
I think maybe it was in there, or when I went to 82 Queen Street, that was his own city.
Yes, his abode in there.
At 82
Yeah.
Queen Street.
He gave a big hunk of land for the church vestry to build the church. And Calabus, see that Calabus up there? That's Calabus. Calabas, I don't know, I never have come across that name anywhere else. I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. The immigrant,
Speaking of Carnes Cross,
is there?
it's Calabluff. And nobody knew what the hell, had any idea what it was.
I know that, and I was an elementary school principal for years, and these developers would come in and say, I heard that you know the history of this place. I'd say, yeah, and I'd give them a book, and they'd use the names in there for their street signs, and the names of streets, the names of subdivisions. That's how Cherry Hill got messed up. Cherry Hill was never in Crowfield, except now. Now it is, but it wasn't historically in Crowfield. It was Lamb Stevens' name of his, which was in Latson area. Okay, the immigrants brandished their royal status by displaying the crescent of the second sun on imported silverware, utensils, and porcelain. Is that still a crescent moon, or has that evolved into something else? Because see, after they invented gunpowder, your armor was no longer good for anything. You took that armor off, but the armor always indicated that you were royalty, because you didn't have any armor unless you were royalty. So they would hang the gorget, which was part of this, they would hang it on a string right there, about the size of my hand. And that started looking like a crescent. And so it starts getting a little mixed up as we go a little further. But they would order and have the crescent placed on their silverware, their utensils, and their porcelain. They were proud of their royalty status. They imported the royalty that was conceived in England and developed in the Caribbean. They imported it into Goose Creek in South Carolina. They ordained the most comprehensive slave code modeled almost word for word after the laws passed by the Barbadian Assembly between 1661 and 1688. That slave code was the most draconian statute for enforcing slavery in the North American colonies. The Carolina colony lay at the southern extreme of British North America, and the unsettled landmass later became Georgia, buffeted the English in Carolina from the Spanish Florida, and screened the French advancing from the Mississippi. Moore used one native tribe against another to acquire slaves. How in the world could 100 guys on horseback ride into the frontier and come back with 100 slaves? How'd they do that? Don't you think those Indians would kill them and trick them? They know the land. The Indians know the land, not these white guys. How'd they do it?
Allies.
Yes, allies. Who else said something?
Bottom.
What? Bottom? Bottom? Bought them. I'm sorry. Your southern accent got to me. That was that Goose Cretan accent. I could tell some of you guys they're not from yous. You're become ya.
I'm a Benya.
You're been ya.
Yeah.
I found I was really a nerd. I was up at USC. I was going through all the dissertations. They have them in their library, going through all the dissertations having to do with history. And other guys are out having good times. I drove to Columbia to do that. And I found one written by this fella, and he said that the white immigrants to Carolina were able to overcome the slaves throughout the entire colony, including North Carolina and later Georgia, by using one tribe against the other. Simple statement. You know, okay, we're going to give you gunpowder and muskets, and you give us some deer skins and things, and we're just fine. But we need you to get some slaves for us. Okay? Now, if you run out of gunpowder, just let us know. We'll give you some more. And your musket that we sold you isn't worth a darn. It was a trade musket. You have to go see a specialist to get it repaired about twice a year. Okay. Now we're going to go over here to another tribe, and we're going to say the same thing. And as soon as you say, well, we don't want to get into the slave business, we'll say, well, okay, there's no problem. Thank you very much. There's your slaves right there. Because we're not going to sell them any. They're not going to get any rifle muskets from us. They're not going to get any shot or shell or powder. And you're going to be able to go over there with your stuff and kill them and get there and sell it to us. And that's what they did all over South Carolina and all over North Carolina. It was a terrible thing. We're kind of laughing about it. But that's how they used That scholar up there in University of South Carolina, he made that specific statement. They used one tribe against the other and was successful. Each of the three expanding empires used their manufactured largesse to buy deerskins and animal hides, trade that leveraged military alliances with native tribes. The Goose Creek men rode into the maelstrom at the tip of the spear of the British Empire in North America. James Moore rode ahead of the Goose Creek men, returning from Florida and Georgia. Well, there's a clock right there, isn't there? Mm-hmm. 7:33.
Yeah.
See, I know that stuff. James Moore, leader of the Goose Creek men, employed brutal, non-relenting militarism ahead of the European and native allies to overwhelm the indigenous tribes of the Carolina backcountry, Georgia, and huge swaths of Florida. This guy, your grandpa, was really a character. He would get, when he was governor, they would verbally assault him because he was such a crude son of a gun. And they claimed that he descended from Roger Moore, who was an Irish rebel leader and killed thousands of Englishmen. The English hated Roger Moore. So he named his next son Roger. Just like if somebody accused me, they called me Adolf or something, because my last name's Heisler. They called me Adolf, so my next son, I'd name him Adolf. That just doesn't work. He named another son Maurice, which was the name of his sidekick that he was involved with, and he named another son Jehu, because Jehu in the Old Testament, have you ever heard of him? He was a king in the Old Testament, and he killed a bunch of his enemies and stacked their heads up in a big pyramid at the entrance to his castle. I never heard of him either. I had to go Google it. But he named one of his boys Jehu, just to shut up the criticism. They said he had well, I'll read it. The opponents of the Goose Creek men damned Maurice Matthews, as Maurice Matthews was the right-hand man of James Moore, as the merciful Hobbes and Lucifer in a huge lump of viperism, mortality with a soul as big as a mosquito. And that was fun when I found that in the minutes from the Colonial Assembly minutes. I found that and I laughed at it too. James Moore's son, here it is, Maurice. We already talked about Roger and Jehu. And then the French began to come over to South Carolina, and they fit right in to what was going on, the idea of nobility. Because what? What? They did, didn't they? The Normans came from France. They fit right in.
Right,
That's where Normandy is.
yeah, right, Normandy is in France, and he was French, or well,
Yeah. Well, don't embarrass me in front of everybody like that. The laugh's great. I love the laugh. Yeah. Some good persisted. I love this as my hero. Francis Lejeune was a Frenchman. He left France, which was a Catholic country, and he was a Frenchman. He went over to England, graduated from Trinity College, and got a doctorate in divinity, Doctor of Divinity, and got assigned to the commission in London. He had a wife, 2 daughters, and a son, and he asked to be sent here. I'm sorry, he was asked to be sent to Barbados, where he worked about 4 years, and then he was asked to be sent to the frontier in Carolina. This is where the action was. He was one wonderful human being, this guy right here. He tried to do away with the physical mutilation of runaway slaves. The Goose Creek men traded unabashedly with pirates and enforced a strict and cruel slave code in fear of slave rebellion. Raise your hand if you knew that Blackbeard was born here in Goose Creek, South Carolina. Oh, great. I can't wait to get to that section. That's going to be, I think we do that in the Halloween section. But I can show you right in a map, right where he was born, right where he lived. And oh boy, that's great. And then he wrote, "It's a dismal sight to perceive how powerful the spirit of the devil is, contrary to Christ is here." He wrote, "The Missionary Society received a complaint concerning Reverend Atkin Williamson, who christened a bear in Goose Creek." Reverend, it's not funny, okay? And Reverend Lejeune investigated the incident and found the minister to be troubled. That's what he wrote in his minutes, that the minister was troubled. I think it had something to do with rum. The Anglican commissary Gideon Johnson lamented lewd and debauched practices among the traders, and some of whom were guilty of such gross enormities as even the heathen themselves have been ashamed. You can only imagine how nasty that was. Then how come up north we had Pilgrims and Puritans up there? The first thing they did when they came into Massachusetts and that area is that they prayed and they worshiped, and they passed a law called the Old Deluder Satan Act, 1642, something like that, which meant if you had a certain number of families, you had to build a church, and you had to build a church. Had to build a school and a church. And the mission of the school and the church was to prepare students for Harvard, their new Harvard College, which would be the ministers for their churches. Nothing but good stuff. Hey, Thanksgiving, you know, the Indians and the white guys get together and they share the drumsticks. None of that was going on down here. Why? Why not? What's the difference between the people that went into Massachusetts, those Yankees, well, I didn't mean to say that, and the ones that came in down here? What's the difference? Well, that's a good point, because we had the rum from the Sugar Islands. Yeah, good point.
The Puritans were led by they wanted a theocracy, and here they were just led by money and greed.
Why? I know what they wanted,
Right.
but there were some down here that wanted goodness, but they couldn't get anywhere with it. The people up there wanted some badness, and they couldn't get anywhere with that. No, I mean, I'm not really trying to be funny. What is the difference between Massachusetts and Carolina?
The people in Massachusetts were there because they were escaping religious persecution in Europe, right?
I don't know. That's why I'm asking y'all.
Well, plenty of the Huguenots who came here had escaped that from France.
You stay out of this. She's my friend, Sarah. She's got a really cool sailboat. Yes.
The people who went to Massachusetts came to worship God their own way. That's why they left England. The people that were in Barbados came to make money.
Thank you very much. Did everybody hear that? I'll buy that. I'll go with that. Thank you. There were no clergy men like John Winthrop in Carolina until 1695, 25 years after the first immigrants arrived. And they built the church in 1719. They finished the church. And that was, 39 years after they settled here. Took them 39 years. The Puritans, was it 49? Okay, I couldn't add that fast. 49 years. 49 years, okay, let's build the church. Up north, the first thing they did when they got in, let's build some churches. Big difference.
Last week's paper, a few days ago, had a picture of that in the 1889 hurricane, that the whole front, well, the top end of it came off in the earthquake.
86.
Yeah, 1886, yeah. You're right, Mike. Thanks. Yes, ma'am.
Where's that located?
That's located off Snake Road. You can't see it. The vestry doesn't want you to know where it is. If you pay $100, they'll let as many as 30, well, there used to be, they let as many as 30 people at a time go in there. If you pay $100, I got the name and the phone number of the man that you give the money to that'll meet you there. Okay? Like I said, I did that, but I didn't. I had so many people show up, I was embarrassed. Thought I was going to get arrested. Anyway, what a magnificent church, but there's something I wanted to point out to you at this church. Do you see any kind of a cross or a crucifix or anything, any kind of religious symbol on the outside of this church? No. And if you go inside, where is it in there? Oh, in the front of the pulpit. Do you know that's, see this right over here, make sure you know, you see where, right there? That little cross there. This whole spiral staircase was moved here from about 10 feet over to the side. It was over in the side. So when you go into the church, there's the pulpit over there. And right there is the heraldry of the king. Look up, see right above the pulpit? You move that pulpit out of the way. I don't know why they moved it back, or why they moved it over there. But originally it was over on the side where you came in, you would have the table where you would have the sacrament. And then above that is the king heraldry, king coat of arms is what I'm trying to think of, the coat of arms. Look at that. the work they did on that. That is the king's house. It was a political institution, I'm so sorry to say, more than a religious institution. And today, yes, in the middle, it used to be over, see where this pillar is right over here? It used to be right here, coming right up here is where it was on the side. So when you came in, you'd see this. Above everything was this. And over here, where it used to be, over here. The church is owned by the vestry, which is the original, you know, they all have names that I've known every one of them. I know them fairly well. They all have names that go back to the original settlement. The original vestry. Now, do you know why Charlestonians and the Chinese are so much alike?
Yes,
Yes, what?
they both live behind high walls, eat rice, and worship their ancestors.
Thank you. They worship their ancestors. Well, we're teasing them. If they were here tonight, they'd laugh along with them. But they have the names of the original vestry. And you can't get on their vestry unless your family, like the royalty, your family has the bloodline. You got to have the bloodline. They believe they own it. However, they've gone to court, but the court session isn't over yet. There's going to be a retrial where the Episcopal Church of South Carolina say, no, we own it. And the vestry is saying, no, they own it. And I don't know. But they're sure doing a good job. They're doing a wonderful job in taking care of it. But if you want to go to Mass there, forget it. You have to be invited as a guest of one of the vestry. Because I did it wrong. I spread the word and said they got Mass at Low Sunday. The Sunday after Easter, they have church service at 11 o'clock. And people started going there and they told me to stop that. I mean, I'm not being critical. I mean, I didn't know any better.
That's because you're Catholic.
Might have something to do with it. And the royalty that you would never go into a tavern. Next week we're going to talk about the 18 Mile House Tavern. The royalty, you would never go to a tavern. You would only go to somebody's house. They had the Royal Revolution where they signed a petition. And those guys had the gall to write a petition to England, to the officials in England, saying that the proprietors never built a school, the proprietors have never built churches and helped us with the churches, they never helped us defend ourselves, and therefore we need to get rid of the proprietors and get a royal government in here, directed by the king. And the Goose Creek men were militarized, caste structure, differential to authority, and aggressively expansionistic. From their cultural cradle in Goose Creek, they expanded their business with buccaneers and pirates and extended their trade north into the sparsely settled eastern North Carolina and south into Georgia. Now we're running out of time. I'm getting tired of talking anyway. But the King of England and his proprietors, their idea was to make money off the colonies. You're supposed to pay so many sterling a year for tax and that sort of thing. Well, in Georgia, they already had initiated some laws, and some of the laws were no alcohol. And the other laws were no attorneys were allowed. That's kind of nice, huh? Isn't that something? And they were really going to have a dignified, well-structured colony, and they weren't going to have the royalty status there. You could get land no matter what your family name was. But the Goose Creek men went down there and took it over and changed it in a hurry. Within a decade, all that stuff was washed away. The family was renowned throughout both Carolinas for their wealth, success, and influence. Remarkably, the Moore family imported over 4,000 slaves into the Carolinas, many assigned to their extensive plantations around Cape Fear up in North Carolina. The family, the ones that James Moore's family that divided the land up. Remember the entail idea? You couldn't divide land. He said, the heck with that. It's my land. I'm going to divide it. He divided it up among his family. Les over in Somerville, your mayor, his last name is Waring, right? Well, one of James Moore, his ancestors, was a Waring that married one of the girls that was the Moore family. And he was from Somerville. So she went to Somerville. So we have a Somerville Goose Creek connection that's like this. You can tell your peeps. Okay. Anyway, this is just a travel log a guy that visited North Carolina and wrote all the stuff, and he listed all the people from Goose Creek, the Moore family, and the Howes from Howell Hall, and the Lewises, and all the different people from Goose Creek that were going up to North Carolina. And by the second decade of the 18th century, sons of the original Goose Creek men embedded the West Indian type style slave culture in North Carolina, as did their fathers in South Carolina. 1740s, 1750s, they got control of Georgia. I think I mentioned that already. Georgia became an extension of the Barbadian slavocracy that emerged in Goose Creek. The British patriarchs worked the crescent dexter into their family heraldry to identify the second son rank within the extended family. The Goose Creek men aptly touted that symbol because most of them hailed as second sons from England or Barbados. You see the crescent in their helmet or hat? 2 South Carolina regiments wore blue uniforms with light infantry helmets blazoned with silver crescents. Do you think that came from the crusade in the Near East? I mean, the Middle East? It's on your state flag? That's a little creepy, isn't it? I don't know, but don't let anybody know. There's Francis Marion. Look what he has on his hat. Some people would say that's nothing but a gorget that they turned into a symbol for their hat, where I believe it's a symbol of the second son. It still is. And oh, you know, here's another thing that kind of helps me. Don't tell this South Carolina Historical Society that I did this, but I went down to their museum and I took a photograph of an item in their museum. You see this crescent moon right there? That's there's another crescent moon that's in the same powder horn that belonged to Francis Marion. So why would Francis Marion carve is he carving a gorget? Looks to me like he's carving a crescent moon in there, doesn't it? You see it? I think it's a crescent moon. I think it's the symbol of the second son that shows that you are of English heraldry. General Moultrie, he was asked to create a flag, and he did that. Later on, they put a palmetto tree in there, and I won't read this, but he said that I had a large blue flag made with a crescent in the dexter corner to be in uniform with the troops. When they wore heraldry in England, they had it divided between the bottom, the middle, the north, and you had the left dexter and the right dexter. I had to go Google it. I didn't know what dexter meant. He said in English heraldry. So he was making a flag fashioned after English heraldry. Well, there it is. I looked it up just the other day, put it in there. Relating to or situated on the right, being or relating to the side of heraldic shield at the right of the person bearing it. That's the definition of that symbol. I called a friend of mine who was working on that committee last year on looking at the state flag and and all that. He said, and he had Eric Emerson, his name. He's the director of South Carolina Department of Archives and History. He said they hadn't gotten to that yet, and he said he wasn't looking forward to it. Southern culture was conceived in England, born in the Caribbean, and planted in Goose Creek, South Carolina to spread throughout the South. Pride of caste and color and privilege. Southern culture. Yuck, right? I'm sorry. We don't like, this is old, we don't like pride of caste. I don't want to be born into a certain caste and can't rise above. I don't want to get into this royalty junk, nor color, nor special privilege. That's not the American way. And we'll talk more about that next week. We're down to 8 minutes, and I just wanted to see if there was any questions. I wanted to thank you. An hour and a half, these chairs are not so bad, huh? Last time I had a lot of complaints. And I'll try to get more, I'll try to get more chairs in here, and I'll bring some more books next week. Please come back. The 18 Mile House Tavern is, you can almost, if this wall wasn't here, you could see right straight down through Button Hall Road over to 176, where the Masonic Lodge is and the pit stop. That was incredibly, and also when you can't do it tonight because it's dark, but when you come up here next week, look up and you'll see where the cables are going. They followed the old road. They follow the road from the Ashley River, past the tavern, right past here, all the way to Back River. Are you fishermen here? You fish Back River? You can flow down Back River into the Cooper River at one time. That's how they got to the market from here. Okay, boy, I'm just blah, blah, blah. Any questions? You guys were just a great audience. Appreciate it. Thank you.